Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to our Parshah webcast. This week's Parshah is the Parshah of Vayishlach, and it is a continuation of last week's portion, or the last 2 weeks, to be more specific, in which the saga, the story begins in the portion of Toldot where Yakov outsmarts Esav and arranges for the blessings that were destined to be given and bestowed upon Esav. He arranges that it should be bestowed upon himself, which would be the blessings that passed on the tradition, the heritage of Jacob, of Avraham and Yitzchak, to the next generation, which is the heritage of the Jewish people. So Yaakov makes sure that it ends up on his lap. When Esau finds out, he is enraged, and he plots to kill his brother Yaakov because of it. If Yaakov therefore is forced to flee from Israel to his uncle's house in a place called Haran, which is a place that is very, very foreign to Yaakov's entire Weltanschauung. It's entirely pagan. Yaakov is a man of God. This is a place of paganism and idol worship, and so on and so forth. And it is, the irony is that it is in this particular place, Haran, that he lives for 20 years, and he builds his family. At the end of 20 years, he tells his father-in-law, it's time for me to go back home. And his father-in-law makes a whole deal with him, a whole story with him, makes a covenant, and he ends up leaving his father-in-law's place, and he makes his way back to Israel. It takes him about 1.5 years or 2 years to get to Israel. He stopped in certain places. He had a lot of people and a lot of flock and a lot of oxen and a lot of donkeys. And there was a whole, he brought with him a whole fortune. So it took him time. As he got closer to his father's house, he sent messengers. And this is where this week's portion begins. He sends messengers to Esav, his brother, to tell him that he wants to make peace, and he wants him to know that the blessings that his father gave him have not been fulfilled anyway, and he tries to placate him and pacify him and calm him down, and to make sure that he just gets over it. And the messengers come back, and they tell him that not only is he not calmed down, but he's prepared a whole army of 400 men to fight you and destroy you. And this is where Yaakov goes into a panic, and he divides his camp into two, and he separates them, and he prepares a whole and large gift for his brother, and he sends this first camp ahead of him. And he sends them in a way where it should be a very lengthy, prepared from a very large gift of animals, and then just a lot of, the Torah tells us that I'll quote it to you. He gives him 200 male goats, 200 ewes, and 200 female goats, 20 male goats, 200 ewes and 20 rams, 30 nursing camels with their young, 40 cows, 10 bulls, 20 female donkeys, and 10 male donkeys. So you're talking about close to 600 animals. And what he does is he divides the gift in a lot of different sections, so that it shouldn't end. When they meet Esav, it should just keep coming. It shouldn't all come at once, so that he just sees how much. And he also prepares for war, and he prays to God. And the reason he panicked, our sages tell us, is because he felt, even though God gave him all the blessings, so this seems to be like a lack of faith. He believes in God, then believe that you'll be okay. But God gave you all the promises you need. What are you worried about? And the rabbis tell us because he was afraid that maybe he had sinned in the last 20 years, and that would have caused that God's blessing should be hampered. That means his sin got in the way. He ruined it. Of course he didn't. But that was the reason for his fear. Anyway, he prepares his gift, and he ends up, Esav sees the people that come with the gift. Who are you? And you say, we belong to Yakov, and this is a gift for you. And then finally Yakov meets Esav. But before that happens, the Torah tells us that that night was a fateful night. That night he was crossing a certain river, the Jabbok River, and bringing his whole family and all the animals and everything over the river. And then he went back to get some small jars, some stuff that he left, and over there an angel appeared and battled with him, had a major wrestle with him. And he overcomes the angel, he strikes down the angel, but before he strikes down the angel knocks him in his sciatic nerve, and he dislocates it, and Yaakov ends up limping. But he ends up overcoming this angel. Who is this angel? This is the angel of Esav, Esau's angel. Makes his way to Esav. They finally meet, and one of the most incredible things happen. And the rabbis dispute the matter. But the way the Torah puts it to us, he runs over to his brother, they run and embrace each other, they kiss and hug. As if 20 years of animosity has just disappeared. Now some say that this was a real change of heart that he had, and he really became his good buddy. Others say that he did not have a change of heart, but for that moment, the first moment he saw him, he had this little, mercy and it's my brother and so on, but he really didn't change his attitude towards him. Be that as it may, when they finally meet, he tells, they exchange, greetings, and they tell each other's life story, how it's been the last 20 years. And then finally Esav tells him, no, let's go back. Let's move together. We'll go together back to our home. So Yaakov tells him, you go yourself. You go ahead. I have little kids. I have sheep. And they ooze. They can't go fast. If I overpress, if I push them too much, they'll all die. And this will take some time for me to make my way back to where we have to go, but you don't waste your time you go, I'll meet you there, I'll come after. And it is from that moment that Yaakov never ever sees Esav again. He sends him off to a place called Seir, and that was the last time Yaakov saw Esav. The rabbis tell us that what Yaakov meant is that you go, and I'll meet up with you when Mashiach comes. That's what he had in mind. And that's how it remained. Esav went on his own. Yaakov continued to move on came back to his father's house. And he eventually settles in the city of Shechem. Actually, he didn't go to his father's house. He went to the city of Shechem. In Shechem, something terrible happens. His daughter goes out to be an influence in the women of the town, and she is raped by a certain Chamor, the son of Shechem. Shechem, the son of Chamor. And the brothers hear of this terrible, terrible degradation that was done to their sister, and they plot to destroy the entire city of Shechem where this happened. How did they do this? They convinced the people. What happened was they said, we want our daughters to be able to marry your sons, and your sons should be able to marry our daughters. My son, he said to Yakov, my son Shechem Chamor said to Yakov, my son Shechem wants to marry your daughter. Would you please allow the shidduch to happen? So the brothers came up with the following idea. They said, we cannot marry you if you're not circumcised. So therefore, if the whole city circumcises, then we'll be able to do this. And when they did, that's how much they wanted to marry the Yaakov's family, that they agreed to circumcise. And on the third day, which is a most difficult day in recovery, the sons of Yaakov took on sword and armor, and they went and killed every male in the town. While they're laying in bed, they were sick with their surgery and all that. And Yaakov is upset. At first, tells them off. Why'd you do this? What's the world going to say about us? We're killers and this and that. And they tell him the most fascinating answer. Should we allow our daughter to be treated like a harlot? And that's how the discussion ends.
That's the only thing I never could understand after they agreed and everything.
After who agreed?
After they agreed about to having circumcision.
Yeah, it was only a plot.
It was only a plot.
Yeah. But they did them a favor. Because what happened was, I once heard a word, you're not going to believe this. It was a Hasidic Rebbe, I don't know who it was, that said, what is the reason that the world at the time didn't take up arms against the Jewish people, against Yakov and the sons? They went and slaughtered a whole city. How did they get away with this? Why didn't anyone say anything? Why didn't the UN at the time say something, condemn them, make a condemnation? What? It's nothing. And the answer he gave was just unbelievable. He said, they were all circumcised. So they all became Jewish. You kill Jews, no one cares.
Oh.
That's why no one said a word.
Hysterical.
It's not hysterical. It's a truism.
Yeah.
It's a truism. The world was under the impression that they all converted to Judaism before this happened. So they said, Jews got killed. It's okay. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to condemn it. You don't have to do anything. And that's how they got away with it.
Huh.
Keep that in mind. But the interesting thing is these two sons of Yaakov that did this were 13 years old at the time. They were young men. They were just bar mitzvah. And it's interesting that how do we know that a bar mitzvah boy is at 13 you become a man? Because in this case the Torah calls them men. And they were only 13. So from here we know that at 13 you're already considered a man. And hence, forever and ever, Jewish people have observed the mitzvahs when they became 13 and they had a bar mitzvah at 13. From our good old brother, good old uncle, good old grandfather or uncle, great uncle Shimon and Levi. That's an irony also that you learn about the obligation to fulfill your mitzvahs from Shimon and Levi from a story that they engaged in what would seem like an act of slaughter and zealousness and fanaticism and extremism, but it was everything but that. They went on Mesiras Nefesh. It was a whole different story. It should be understood in its right light. It's not to be understood as hotheads that went and killed people for no reason. But that's the end of that story. And the rest of the story, the Parshah, is again God reassuring Yaakov that he's with him, and at this point God tells him that you're not going to be known as Yaakov anymore, but as Yisrael. He gives him a new name, Israel. And that's when the Jews got the name Israel, by the way, this Parshah. And that's what we're called, the sons of Israel. And In the rest of the Parsha, we have the birth of Benjamin, the 12th of the 12 tribes. And then we have at the end the lineage, the pedigree of Esav, his descendants and his families, everything that came from him. And that's how the story of this Parsha ends. So this story of Yakov and Esav is a fact, it's not just a story between two people, it is a story between civilizations. Yakov is the perpetual Jew, and Esav is the perpetual Goy. And they're always at battle. And in the middle of the night, when we're all alone, the Goy, the anti-Jew, attacks. In the form of sometimes of an angel, sometimes whatever. They attack the Jew. Yaakov always overcomes, but he ends up limping. He ends up limping. And that's the story of our history, if you think about it in a nutshell. Besides all the good things, obviously. But our relationship with the world, for a millennium, has been pretty much the same story. We've been always attacked and tried to be annihilated. They tried to annihilate us again and again, and we always overcame. But often we ended up with a zetz on the side. We didn't come out 100% unscathed, untouched. We ended up limping. The Jewish people have been limping through this long exile. There's no question about it. But God did always save us. We always came through. And that's just really the story. I mean, that's really how it has been in our relationship with the non-Jew and the world at large. Now I want to talk about the relationship between Jews themselves, the story of the Jewish people, irregardless of their relationship with the world out there. Who's the Jew? We know who we are vis-a-vis the world. It's a struggle. Esav hates us, and the rabbis tell us it's a halacha. It's a halacha, meaning it's a fact that will never change. That Esav despises Yakov. He hates Yakov. There's a certain element of our world that will always hate the Jew. And it has never been any different. That's unfortunately, sadly, it's almost like a prophetic truth, that it has to be that way. It just has always been that way, whether it has to be that way, but it seems that it does, because it's a halacha, means it's going to be that way till Mashiach comes. We just have to know how to respond to it. You're not going to do away with it. The question is whether we're going to learn how to respond to it or not. So that's the story between Yaakov and Esav. But now let's zero in on Yaakov himself. God tells Yaakov, you are going to now become known as Yisrael, Israel. And why is his name Israel? We'll talk about that in a minute, what Israel represents. And the Torah says over here, let me read this to you. This is in Genesis chapter 35, verse 10. God said to him, to Jacob, your name is Yakov. You will no longer be named Yakov, which denotes deception, akava. Yaakov means deception. Rather, Yisrael shall be your name, denoting a leader, Sar. Israel means Sar. And he named him Yisrael. Do you remember who else had a name change in his life in the later part of his life?
Sarah and Avram.
Avram had a name change. And over there too it says, almost the same words, verbatim, that your name will no longer be known as Avram, but it will from now on be Avraham. And indeed the rabbis tell us that from that verse we learn that if someone calls Avraham with the name Avram, has violated a biblical commandment. Because it says, your name shall not anymore be Avram. The same exact thing is said regarding Yaakov. Your name, you will no longer be named Yaakov. Rather, Yisrael shall be your name. The question then is, why do we still continue to call Yakov Yisrael with the name Yakov? He's still named Yakov, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. You don't say Abraham, Isaac, and Israel. Why Avraham do the rabbis tell us if you continue to name him Avram, you have violated a biblical commandment? But if you name Yaakov, and the reason is because it says in that verse regarding Abraham that you shall no longer be called Abraham, it's almost the same words are used by Yaakov, yet we still call him Yaakov. And the obvious answer is that God continues to call him Yaakov. In the Torah, after he's named Israel, we find the name Yaakov appear, I don't know about how many times, but it must be hundreds and hundreds of times. Hundreds of times.
But it doesn't for Abraham.
No. It does not for Avraham. Once Hashem changed his name from Avram to Avraham, you never see the name Avram appear again in the Torah, nowhere. But with Yaakov, it's different. The Torah keeps on going back and forth. Sometimes Israel, sometimes Yaakov. In fact, more Yaakov than Israel. He calls the Jewish people the Bnei Yisrael, the children of Israel. But Yaakov as an individual is almost always continued to be called Yaakov. Very seldom is his name referred to as Yisrael, as the individual. Why is that? And I'll share with you that something that the Rebbe once explained on this topic. That is that both names are used for Yaakov, Yisrael and Yaakov, for eternity. In other words, both names are valid names. What does Yaakov mean? Yaakov means, as we just said, it connotes the idea of deception. The name Israel represents a leader, master. You're a master over yourself. You're a master over the situation. You're not being led. You're not reactionary. You're proactive. You're the one that takes charge. Yaakov is the deceiver. So what's the difference? Well, there's a big difference. But why would the Jewish people, which we are, the sons of Jacob, the sons of Israel, continue to have both names? So he explains that Yaakov and Yisrael represent two different aspects of the Jewish people. There's the Jew, I'll give you an example. There's the Jew of Sunday through Friday. And then there's the same Jew on Shabbos. What's the difference between the Jew from Sunday through Friday? Jew Sunday through Friday has to go into the world, has to go into the street, into the market, into the city, make a dollar, work hard, get involved with worldly things, mundane pursuits, mingle with people that are not really of his frame of mind, very foreign environment. He has to go into a very foreign environment for the Jew. And that's the Avodah, the divine worship, the commitment of a Jew from Sunday to Friday. It's the Jew out there in a very foreign environment. On Shabbos it's the other way around. Shabbos, on the contrary, Shabbos we're in an environment that's entirely ours, entirely holy. What is the difference? So we'll start with the weekday. When a Yid is in the marketplace, when a Yid is in an environment that is not so holy, by force he has no choice, he must go there. Why does he must go there? Because that's what God wants, that he should go out there. As we spoke last week, the Zvulun, to go out there and try to make a difference in a very foreign environment. But here's where he needs to develop an interesting skill. He has to develop the skill of Yakov. What's the skill of Yakov? Trickery. Somewhat deception. What's deception in this case? You're not allowed to steal, of course. That's prohibited. But deception would mean, let's divide the world into two. There's holy and there's not so holy. As we learned in Tanya, there's Kedusha, the holy realm, and Klippa, the cover-up, the not so holy realm, the realm where godliness and Hashem are not revealed. And we are told that in this environment of Klippa, in this environment where God is concealed, we are to go and uncover Him. How? Through commerce, through involvement, through doing mitzvah while you're involved in commerce, doing it in an honest way, and so on and so forth. The Rebbe calls this deception. Why is this called deception? Because what's the Jew doing? He's going into an environment that is not holy, and it's almost like he's stealing away the sparks. He's stealing certain parts of the unholy environment. He's deceiving it. He's making it, he's pretending I'm involved in your pursuits, I'm involved in your world, business, I'm making business. But in the same time, he's doing it like a Jew. He's throwing in a word of Torah. He's constantly maneuvering in his day and his night in a way that he is, instead of becoming part of that environment, he's taking that environment and bringing it into his realm of holiness. In a way, this is called, it's deceiving Klippa. It's deception. And Yakov needs to do that in order to survive in the world that we live in. If Yakov came and announced, here I am, I'm the Jew, and I'm going to turn you around and make you holy, he'll fail before he starts. It's dead on arrival. So he comes looking like a businessman. He comes looking like a man of the world. Well, he has a yarmulke on, of course, but, he speaks the language of the people. He behaves business. He talks to them in their language. He's part of them, in a sense. And they don't even realize that this whole facade is putting on their boots and their shoes and their garments and like last week, he put on the clothing of Esav. He puts on Esav's clothing. The voice is the voice of Yaakov, but the clothing is the clothing of Esav. And he's able to turn around the situation and deceive Klippa and turn it into Kedusha. And here he says even one more point about the name Yaakov. The name Yaakov is made up of two words, really. Yud, Okev. Yud is what?
Hashem.
The beginning of Hashem's name. Okev is the heel. That's why is he called Yaakov. If you remember in the story of his birth, his hand, the Yud is Yodai. His hand was holding on to the heel, the Okev of Esav, when he was born. He stuck his hand out and held on. When he came out, he was holding on, schlepping along. That's the way he was born. So he was named Yaakov. The Yud represents the hand, but the Yud also represents his pintal Yid, his essence of his neshama. What's a Yud? A dat. It's the core essence of his soul. Okay, is the bottom, all the way bottom, the lowest part of the Yid. And it also represents the foot sole, right? That's what the Okev is. The foot sole is the place where Yid connects to the world. What part of you connects you to the world? Your foot, your soul. That's the part that's what connects your body to the world under you, to the world at large. So the Okev is the Yid. So the heel represents the Yid as he's out down there in the trenches, in the world of Klippa. The Yud represents the Yid, the essence of the Yid. And what's his job? To bring the Yud down, all the way down into the lowest realm, into the Okev, to the heel of reality. But for that you need a little deception, a little trickery. Straightforward it won't work. Straightforward it doesn't go. It doesn't mean to hide your identity. It doesn't mean to hide your Judaism. But all it means is you got to put on a tie and a nice suit and walk the walk and talk the talk and present itself as you're a man of the world. But you never forget that you are not really a man of the world. And here I'll tell you a story. There was once a chassid that came to the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe of Lubavitch. Now he was a chassid of the Rebbe Maharash. And he, after he married, he had children, he went into business. And he was a pretty good businessman. So what would he do? When he was in Lubavitch, he wore his hat, his fedora, and his streimel, his big long coat, and his Hasidic garb. When he went to the business, when he went to St. Petersburg and to Moscow, wherever else he went to do business, okay, over there he put on his business attire. All right. But when he would come back to Lubavitch, of course, he would take off that business attire and wear his regular Hasidic attire. This went on for many years. Eventually, he began to think to himself, I'm deceiving the Rebbe a little bit when I come back to Lubavitch. I'm putting on the Hasidic attire. 99% of my life, I'm wearing an un-Hasidic attire. What am I playing games? I come over here, I put a Purim costume. Like, what am I doing over here? It's not right. It's not. I'm deceiving the Rebbe. He thinks I'm this big chassid, when really I'm a businessman. That's my world is business. So he decided, I'm a chassid. I'm not going to fool. I'm not going to present myself to the Rebbe when I'm not. So he decided next time he comes to Lubavitch, he's going to put on his regular business attire. That's what he's used to wearing in Petersburg. He came to Lubavitch there. Comes the time for his private audience with the Rebbe. He walks in, again with his business attire. The Rebbe looks at him and says, "What's this? Why the difference? Why the change?" See, he humbly said to the Rebbe, I have to apologize in the past. I should have also came like this. But I feel it's not right for me to deceive you, and it's just, I can't do this. So the Rebbe told him, now I'm really sad. Why? Because I knew all these years that you're a businessman. I knew that you're a businessman. You informed me. You used to report to me about your business dealings. I know how you dress in Petersburg. But I thought that you are deceiving them, and this is where you're real. Now I see that became your reality, and this became you're deceiving us. So that's why I always knew that you came over here and you changed into your Hasidic garb, but I thought that was the real you. That was deception. I thought Petersburg was deception. Now I see that Lubavitch was deception. So the chassid shook it. It was a shake-up and a wake-up call for the chassid. He realized his mistake. So the question is, when does, is the Yakov the real you, or is the Yisrael the real you? Let's see who this Yisrael is. Yisrael, we said, was the name that God gave the Jewish people to Yakov because they mastered, even over God, the angel. They overpowered the angel, which was an angel of Asa, but it was an angel of God. So the mastery quality of the Jewish people is expressed in the name Yisrael. When is that? Let's say Shabbos Yom Tov. Shabbos and Yom Tov, there's no world, there's no mundane reality, there's no materialism. It's all holiness. Friday night in Shul, then even the meal is a holy meal because it's a mitzvah. And even the sleeping on Shabbos is a mitzvah because it says that sleeping on Shabbos is a pleasure, and you're supposed to have pleasure on Shabbos. And then the next morning, you're again in Shul for extra hours, and then you have a kiddush, and you're eating, and you're davening, and you're singing, and you're farbringing. And the whole day is, and you learn more. The whole day is a day where the Yid is a total master of his situation. Doesn't need to deceive anyone. He's the real him. He's master over himself, master over his environment. Doesn't have to cheat anyone out, not even in a positive way. He can be who he is. He's the master of his environment. So the question is now, what's the real Jew? Is the Yakov the real you, or is the Yisrael the real you? That's why we maintain both of these names. We maintain both of these names because they're both crucially important in our Avodas Hashem and our divine worship. We have to have the Yakov element in our life, and we have to have the Yisrael element in our life. but who's the what's your pleasure? Where is the real you expressed? On Shabbos in shul or on Monday in the office? And that's the big question that we have to answer ourselves. Are you is the real you in Petersburg with your schnipsel, your nice tie, and your fancy suit, or the yid that comes to Shabbos and shul also with a nice tie, but a different kind? The Shabbos attire, this is a business attire, and this is a Shabbos attire. You understand the difference. The question is, where are you more comfortable? Where are you a master, and where are you going like this? You need both. And this is, I put it in very general terms, Sunday to Friday as opposed to Shabbos. This is true in every single day also. On every single day we have a little Shabbos, a little island in time called 7 to 8 o'clock or 8:30 when we daven here and we learn. That's the Shabbos of the weekday. And then we have to take off the towels and film and get into the car, go down to the hustle and bustle and make $1 and start the deception of transferring the world into Kedusha. In this world we don't have to deceive anyone. It's all Kedusha. It's all holy in this room, in these environments, in the natural Jewish habitat. But not out there in the world. Over there, if you want to grab some of it into Kedusha, you got to deceive. I'm coming to talk to you about selling Persian rugs, but it's going to happen. It's going to end up, the money's going to go to tzedakah. We're going to say a word of godliness. We're going to talk a story, tell a Jewish story, inspire another Jew to put on tefillin, and so on and so forth. It's all in the name of business. But what's the purpose? The purpose is the mitzvahs. The purpose is the tzedakah. The purpose is the God. The purpose is the yud that ended up in the Yakov, in the heel of the world. It's not about the heel. It's about the yud that is in the heel. And that's what Yakov represents. So I hope that we can all internalize this most important message. First of all, in our relationship with the goyim and the world out there, the friendly goyim and the not so friendly goyim, the Asavs of the world. Some of them hug us and kiss us. Some of them outright hate us. We have all kinds. They're all in there. It's all in the Parshah, right there in front of us. But even the ones that kiss us and hug us, what does Yakov tell them? You go ahead. I'll go at my pace. You and me have not much in common, and we probably should stay apart. That's the Asav that kisses us and hugs us, let alone the Asav that hates us and is full of animosity. So we have to know how to deal with the Asavs of the world. Then we have to know how to deal with the heel of the world, with the lowest level of the world, the foot soles of the world. You got to bring the Yud in there and transform it and steal away a little bit of time for Torah, trick away the world a little bit of time from its mundaneness, is that a word, or its materialistic side, and transfer it a little bit into the realm of holiness. That's our job for the 6 days of the week. The job of Yakov, trickery. May you be successful trickers. Amen. Have a good night and a good week. And we'll see you again next Monday, Mitzvah Hashem.